The story begins with the protagonist reflecting on the abstract nature of sight. Born without the ability to see, Kunon's family had long accepted his reality, yet they constantly urged him to persevere and take pride in himself, believing he possessed the traits of a hero. Despite their encouragement, the boy continued to question his existence, struggling to comprehend a sense he did not possess. Shortly afterward, Kunon was summoned by his teacher to begin his formal education. Guided to the classroom by one of the mansion's maids, Kunon found his initial sword training complicated and discouraging. However, the maid encouraged him, noting that he might accomplish impressive feats through magic. This sparked a train of thought in the boy regarding how far he could progress without relying on others, as he was painfully aware of his inability to navigate or perform basic tasks without support. Kunon eventually arrived at the room where his master waited to instruct him in the magical arts. When the teacher inquired about his current capabilities, Kunon used his wand to cast a water spell, surprising her by having already mastered the technique. Curious about the physical manifestation of his magic, Kunon asked about the water's size. The teacher replied that it was roughly the size of an eyeball, but upon realizing the insensitivity of her phrasing, she quickly apologized. However, Kunon was not offended. Instead, he realized that he could perceive the shape of magical manifestations, a discovery that filled him with excitement. This newfound perception made him increasingly curious about the world, particularly regarding the textures and nature of the food he consumed daily. Through touch and taste, he explored his meals with renewed interest. When he picked up a fruit, Kunon correctly identified it as an apple before she could speak. Noting his enthusiasm, the maid watched as he smelled a strawberry, commenting on its strong scent. In her excitement, she began pressing different foods against his cheek for him to guess. Later, Kunon's teacher arrived at the library to ask what book he wished to hear that day. He requested a history of the Holy Knight of the Kingdom of Huglia. Although the sudden request surprised the teacher, the maid assured her it was fine, promising to intervene if the content became too heavy. It was explained that long ago, a great war occurred involving heroes from many lands and a demon lord. The hero of the kingdom managed to defeat the enemy but lost an arm and a leg in the battle. Following the war, some of that hero's descendants were born missing body parts or senses, such as their sight. These children were viewed as reincarnations of the hero, bearing what were known as the hero's scars. Kunon, however, rejected this heavy burden, stating that he was simply himself. He practiced using his own magic, managing to duplicate several spheres of water. To him, mastering magic was the key to seeing and feeling the world. Unfortunately, his physical stamina did not match his magical ambition. Whenever he exerted himself, he became exhausted and fainted. While tucking him into bed, he acknowledged that he lacked the physical strength and knowledge to utilize advanced magic. The maid, noting that he was only 7 years old, insisted he needed to eat better to grow strong. Frustrated that he was lagging behind other children and fainting from basic spells, Kunon expressed a desire to develop muscles, despite the difficulty he faced with running or walking. The maid suggested training in sword techniques to build his body, an idea that excited the boy. Eiko, the maid, decided to speak with Kunon's father to hire a qualified fencing instructor. Before she left, Kunon thanked her for her help. While Eiko excitedly contemplated a possible raise, Kunon simply asked that she keep the noise down during his magic training. The following day, a fencing instructor arrived to train Kunon. During the session, Professor Jenny appeared unexpectedly. The instructor cheerfully noted how quickly the day had passed. Jenny observed that Kunon had taken up swordsmanship, and the boy explained that physical strength was a prerequisite for wielding magic effectively. Looking closely, Jenny realized that Kunon had transformed significantly since she last saw him. She offered him a chance to rest, but Kunon preferred to continue training to improve. Later, Jenny decided to review the Aori spell, known as water magic. When Kunon cast the spell, everyone present was astonished to see several water spheres materialize. The teacher was shocked, finding it frightening that he had reached such a high level almost entirely on his own. The narrative then shifts to Mirika, Kunon's future wife. Her maid informed her that the carriage had arrived to take her to see him. Mirika remarked that Kunon had always worn an apathetic expression, but her maid reminded her that the union was decided by the royal family. During the journey, Mirika reflected on the fact that Kunon bore the hero's scars, making the political marriage a royal duty. She recalled their first meeting, where she had wanted to play and learn what he liked, but Kunon had remained distant and sad, lamenting his helplessness. Returning to the present, Mirika felt a deep sadness at the prospect of seeing that dejected face forever. However, upon her arrival, Kunon greeted her with a smile, confusing her completely. She sought to understand what had changed to make him seem so happy. Kunon explained that he had come to like her, a confession that surprised Mirika. He then demonstrated his abilities by creating a rainbow above his head, enchanting her. Kunon apologized for troubling her in the past, and she returned the apology. He asked her to listen to his stories, as he had finally experienced fun moments. Seeing him so cheerful, Mirika fell deeply in love. On her way home, she felt radiant, considering it a wonderful day and eagerly anticipating their next meeting. Back at the mansion, Kunon was surprised to realize that, for the first time, he had reached out his hand to someone. The maid celebrated, declaring this proof that he was a true gentleman. Motivated by this, Kunon asked his teacher the next day to read more about chivalry, wishing to be worthy of Mirika. Meanwhile, the teacher realized she was in a difficult position. She noticed she could no longer maintain 7 water spheres simultaneously, meaning Kunon had evolved far too quickly. There was little left for her to teach him at the basic level. Her initial plan had been to teach simple magic to a child, a low-effort job with a good salary, but she now had to move on to intermediate magic. Although she worried that Kunon was too young to deal with the inherent dangers of advanced magic, she decided to continue the job to support herself. The next day, she attempted to teach Kunon how to imbue feelings into water. To demonstrate, she created 1 icy sphere and 1 hot sphere, explaining that this ability defined a mage's individuality and talent. Kunon decided to try immediately. He cast his magic and asked Eiko to taste it. She realized it was plum juice. The teacher was shocked that he had accomplished in seconds what had taken her an entire night of study. When asked if it was difficult, Kunon casually replied that it was not. At nightfall, Kunon decided to test his perception using 2 apples, trying to better understand aroma and composition. However, he encountered difficulties because he could not physically see colors. Without understanding color, he could not fully grasp magical changes. Despite this, he resolved to continue because he wanted to see everything in the world. At dawn, Kunon went downstairs for breakfast and announced that he could now see colors using magic. Eiko was surprised, though Kunon admitted he likely still couldn't see them properly. When Eiko expressed confusion, Kunon explained that he perceived colors through magic textures. He picked up a green apple and identified it as red. Eiko realized that while the colors appeared distinct to him, he did not yet know their correct names. Kunon agreed, noting it was the first time he had ever perceived these tones. Eiko corrected him, explaining the apple was light green. Although Kunon was confused, realizing that learning to feel color would be difficult, he successfully demonstrated his progress. When Eiko asked how many apples were on the plate, Kunon correctly answered that there were 5, 3 red and 2 green. Eiko was fascinated by the boy's rapid progress and could hardly wait to see what he would achieve next. When Eiko shared her discovery with Kunon's father, the man was stunned to learn that his son could now distinguish colors. Eiko explained that while the range of this magical perception was currently limited, it was sufficient for Kunon to differentiate shades, which became increasingly clear the closer he was to an object, especially through physical touch. Upon being asked if the boy could read, Eiko confirmed that he could, as he had learned to identify the color of ink by running his fingers over the letters. Though Kunon was still mastering the nuances of language, he had already become enchanted by the world of books and illustrated guides. Kunon's father questioned whether the boy might wish to return to the main house to ease the family's worries, but Eiko advised against it. She believed that Kunon was in a vital stage of discovery and that such a move might interfere with his personal goals. Her assessment of his potential was soon proven correct. The following day, Kunon managed to manifest a sphere of red-tinted water. However, the sudden arrival of his family startled him, causing him to drop the magic. The red liquid splashed over him, and seeing her son covered in what appeared to be blood, his mother fainted on the spot. Jenny, observing the scene, realized that Kunon possessed an absurd, almost frightening amount of mana. She began to suspect that he might one day attain the most prestigious title in the magical world, the Blue Mage. The focus shifted to a conversation between Kunon's father and his older brother. The father expressed concern about sending Kunon to a noble school, fearing the boy might be frightened by the outside world after years of isolation. He tasked his older son with protecting Kunon. The brother, haunted by a past failure to protect his sibling, felt a surge of fear but ultimately promised to do everything in his power to be a true older brother. Meanwhile, Kunon's progress continued to bring joy to the household as he began reading through several volumes independently. Jenny noted the cheerful atmosphere and continued her lessons, focusing on social etiquette. She even incorporated Eiko's suggestion of teaching him a sense of humor, hoping to mold him into an elegant yet amusing man. She acknowledged that he was becoming far more adorable and socially capable than he had ever been. As the time for a serious decision approached, Eiko escorted Kunon to the main house to meet his father. On the way, she asked Kunon to use his magic to warm her, which he did successfully. Sensing a shift in the air, Kunon worried he was in trouble for his previous blood sphere mishap, but Aiko reassured him. Upon their arrival, they were greeted by the butler and Kunon's brother. When the brother offered to help him navigate the halls, Kunon politely declined, explaining that his magical senses allowed him to feel everything around him, a revelation that deeply impressed his older sibling. In the meeting with his parents, Kunon initially expressed a desire to avoid the academy, fearing he would only be a burden to others. His father explained that while the king had granted special permission for him to stay home, all nobles were technically required to attend. He warned Kunon that neglecting these duties could harm Mirika's future. Motivated by his desire to protect Mirika's standing, Kunon finally agreed to go. The plan was simplified. He would only need to attend the academy 5 times to take the promotion exams and obtain his official diploma. Kunon later shared the news with Mirika, who was overjoyed at the prospect of spending time with her future husband. Despite his uneasiness about school life and the potential jealousy of other students, Kunon promised to do his best. As they boarded the carriage, Kunon cast a stabilizing spell to prevent the vehicle from shaking, remembering his father's complaints about back pain. During the journey, Kunon confessed to his brother that the desire to disappear, which had plagued his younger years, was gone. He was now determined to live and survive. Upon arriving at the academy, Kunon was welcomed by Mirika. Though he hesitated briefly, overwhelmed by the presence and voices of so many strangers, he took the step forward that the old Kunon never would have taken. His assigned tutor, who had known him since he was very young, was amazed to see how much he had matured as he walked confidently ahead of her. However, his arrival was met with mixed reactions. While some students marveled at him, others, driven by jealousy, viewed him with contempt. During the exams, Kunon easily navigated the time-limited tests, answering every question correctly to his teacher's immense satisfaction. The peace was short-lived, however, as he was soon confronted in the corridors by Lyle, Mirika's brother. Lyle provoked him, openly doubting that Kunon truly held the family blessing. Choosing to settle the matter without a physical brawl, Kunon manipulated the water in the air to create a localized drenching effect on Lyle's trousers. To the surrounding students, it appeared as though the prince had humiliated himself. As Lyle fled in a fit of rage and embarrassment, Kunon's brother panicked over the social fallout, but Kunon remained unbothered, his mind already drifting toward his next goal, finding a hamburger for lunch. After they sat down, Kunon asked the others if they knew why Lyle had made such a fuss earlier. Mirika explained that it was likely an attempt to keep her in check. Since Lyle was the 6th prince and she was the 9th princess, she was technically below him in the royal hierarchy. However, because she was engaged to Kunon, a sorcerer who possessed the hero scar, her status was significantly elevated. Lyle likely felt threatened by the idea of Mirika surpassing him in the hierarchy and had tried to establish dominance, though she noted he wasn't necessarily a bad person. Kunon worried that he might have overdone his reaction earlier and wondered if he should apologize. The others immediately shut down the idea, insisting that Lyle got what he deserved after the stunt he had pulled. Time passed, and back at home, Kunon began learning how to change the texture of ice to mimic other objects. He successfully made the ice feel like an apple, impressing his teacher, though she suggested he try feeling more objects to expand his repertoire of textures. When the day of the final exam arrived, Ixio noticed Kunon repeatedly touching the carriage horse outside the school. When asked what he was doing, Kunon responded that he was simply gathering samples, leaving Ixio baffled. Shortly after, Mirika arrived to greet Kunon. He told her he was going to miss being able to talk to her at school since it was his last day, but Mirika reminded him that they still had the whole day ahead of them, so there was no need for premature goodbyes. As they headed into the exam room, Kunon felt excited as it was his first time actually being in a class with other students. However, he admitted he would also miss the private time he used to spend with Professor Cass during his tests. Cass assured him that she would still be paying attention to him, even with other students present. Ixio noticed that Kunon and Cass seemed to have become very close. Kunon explained it was natural to become friends since he had learned a lot about her through their discussions during tests, such as the fact that Cass only became a teacher because she had a crush on one of the male applicants. The man ended up failing while Cass passed, so she decided to just keep teaching. The others thought it was good that Kunon and Professor Cass were getting along, though they found it a bit odd for her to be venting about her love life to a child. Just then, a group of other students approached, asking Ixio and Mirika to introduce them to Kunon. They admitted they hadn't had a chance to talk to him yet because they were intimidated. Kunon formally introduced himself, revealing he had been concerned that no one ever approached them, leading him to believe Mirika and Ixio had no friends. Mirika explained that her friends only kept their distance because she had told them she wanted to spend quality time with Kunon without being bothered. Kunon was relieved to hear this, as he wouldn't have known what to do if his friends were total loners, though he noted that he personally didn't mind being alone. A little while later, the exam was about to begin, but Lyle was still in the hallway, staring out the window, acting cool and mysterious. His lackeys warned him that the final exam was starting and reminded him that he would have to repeat the year if he missed it, leaving him no choice but to attend. Meanwhile, back in the classroom, Kunon was busy feeling the texture of a pigeon near the windows when Cast announced the test was beginning. Mirika told Kunon she had saved him a seat next to her, but before he could accept, Lyle cut in between them and started staring daggers at Kunon. Ixio, unable to interfere, recalled hearing the royal maid's gossip about how much of a screw-up Lyle was. The reason Lyle acted out so angrily was that he knew people made fun of him behind his back despite their outward respect. While Lyle was lost in thought, Kunon suddenly grabbed his hand and formally introduced himself. Lyle panicked, stating he hadn't given permission to be touched, but Kunon reminded him that they would eventually be brothers-in-law and should get to know one another. As Kunon felt Lyle's hand, he deduced from the skin texture that Lyle must have a handsome face. It was a kind sentiment, and because Lyle rarely received genuine compliments, he didn't know how to handle it. He turned to Mirika to ask if something was wrong with Kunon. Mirika and the rest of the class found the situation funny and began to laugh. Lyle initially thought they were laughing at him, but Mirika explained they were simply laughing because it was the first time anyone had seen him get so flustered. Lyle denied being flustered and demanded Kunon let go, but Kunon held on for a few extra seconds to compliment the strength of Lyle's voice. Lyle, who had planned to be mean to assert dominance, was left unsure of how to react. Cass called for everyone's attention, and the test began. By the end of the day, Cass had finished grading the papers and announced the results. Everyone had passed and would graduate. Afterward, as Kunon and Ixio boarded the carriage to head home, Kunon told the group he had fun. He teased Cass, suggesting that if she was still looking for a boyfriend, she should consider Ixio since he was still single. Ixio protested, and Cass began to regret talking to Kunon about her love life. Additionally, Lyle had learned a lot from his interaction with Kunon and resolved to make an effort to be nicer from then on. A few days later, now that Kunon had graduated, he focused on learning new spells. Jenny was currently testing him on everything he had learned. She asked him to make a spinning ball of water, split it into 10, and then color and texture each one individually, all of which Kunon pulled off with little difficulty. Jenny praised him, but Kunon said he wasn't done yet. He proceeded to turn one of the water balls into a dove and had it fly into the air. Jenny couldn't believe her eyes and fell to her knees, realizing that even master water mages couldn't pull off such a feat so easily. Later, while having tea with Kunon, Jenny asked Aiko to give them some privacy so she could tell Kunon something important. Once they were alone, Jenny announced that there was nothing left for her to teach him. In fact, she felt she hadn't had much to teach for the past few months since she was only meant to instruct him in elementary magic, and he was now a better mage than she was. Kunon stood up and insisted she was a great teacher, noting how much he enjoyed the desperate little tricks she turned into lessons. He explained that while she might not be at the level of advanced mages, her insight gave him new hope. Jenny appreciated his words, admitting she had to work hard to come up with those lessons and was now at her limit. When Kunon asked if she wanted a raise, Jenny clarified that it was the opposite. She felt guilty receiving a high salary when her brain was bone dry of ideas. She insisted he deserved a better sorcerer as a teacher. Despite Kunon begging her to stay, Jenny said goodbye and left the mansion. As she walked away, she thought to herself that Kunon was undoubtedly a genius who would become one of the greatest mages on the continent, vowing to do her best to train her own magic to keep up with him. The next morning, Iko informed Kunon that his usual academic tutor, Miss Flora, had also resigned. Kunon was shocked, though he realized it made sense since he had finished the curriculum and graduated from the Noble Academy. He decided to write her a thank you letter. Iko thought that was a great idea and asked if he could also ask Flora if she knew any single 20-year-old men interested in marriage. Kunon felt hurt, thinking Iko wanted to leave him behind as well. She assured him she wasn't trying to make him feel bad but needed to consider her future. She was sure Kunon would be alright on his own, but Kunon disagreed. With Jenny gone, Flora resigned, and Aiko planning her future, he felt he wouldn't have anyone left soon. That night during dinner, Kunon told his father about Jenny quitting and her advice that he find a master sorcerer to continue his training. Ixio recalled a rumor about an extraordinary royal sorcerer. Their mother recognized the description and asked if Ixio was talking about Xanil Finn, who was famous throughout the capital for his immense power and good looks. She agreed he would be a perfect candidate. However, Kunon's father noted a major problem. As a royal sorcerer, Zanel only took orders from the king and the royal court. Furthermore, he rarely left the castle, making the chances of hiring him slim. Nevertheless, Kunon's father promised to ask the king to see if anything could be done. A little while later, the Grand Master Mage at the royal castle received a report stating that an apprentice-level sorcerer boy was asking to study under one of the royal sorcerers. This was practically unheard of, even for the son of a noble who was best friends with the king. The Grand Master's apprentice happened to be Mirika's older sister, so she personally liked Kunon, but royal sorcerers were not swayed by status or power. The Grand Master initially intended to reject the request regardless of Kunon's connections, but upon reading Kunon's file, he paused. He realized that this kid might actually be special. A couple of days passed, and finally, Kunon received a summons from the royal palace to present himself to the royal sorcerer. He boarded a carriage alongside his father, who appeared quite pleased with how events had unfolded. Kunon remarked that the friendship between the king and his father must run deep for the monarch to agree to such a demand. However, his father clarified that the true reason for the audience was that the head sorcerer of the court had taken a profound interest in Kunon's abilities and wished to meet him personally. When his father inquired about the current extent of his magic, Kunon immediately chanted a spell, creating a small ball of water that quickly transformed into a black cat and settled onto his lap. Amazed, his father reached out to touch the creature, expressing disbelief that magic could achieve such realism. To his surprise, it felt neither like water nor magic. It felt exactly like any stray cat one might find on the street. Kunon explained that he had only recently mastered the animal's appearance, as his previous attempts had resulted in completely transparent constructs. Recently, however, he had managed to control the color as well. As his father played happily with the magical cat, Kunon asked if they should get a real one for their home. Like a typical father, he refused, citing the potential mess, the risk of tripping and hurting himself, and the fact that Kunon's mother preferred dogs anyway. Soon, they entered the capital and were immediately greeted by a silver-haired girl named Rei, the second princess of the kingdom and Mirika's older sister. Kunon greeted her warmly, noting that he was very fortunate to have such a beautiful woman as his future sister-in-law. His father briefly wondered if his son lacked propriety, but decided to address that later. Rei smiled, stating she had heard much about Kunon from her younger sister and wished to have a long conversation with him. She noticed the cat and asked if it required special food, but the moment Kunon's father placed it on the ground, Kunon ended the spell, reducing the cat to nothing more than a puddle of water. This display made Rei realize that Kunon was far more skilled than she had initially thought. While his father lamented not getting the chance to name the cat, Rei offered to escort Kunon to the Black Tower. His father decided to have a chat with the king before heading home, promising to arrange a carriage for Kunon whenever he was ready. Kunon told him not to worry, as he planned to visit Mirika after the Black Tower to take her on a date. His father told him to enjoy his time and departed. As Rei led Kunon toward the Black Tower, she asked if he was comfortable walking or required assistance. Kunon replied that he was fine and immediately launched into a series of complex questions about magic that confused her, as they were highly advanced theoretical inquiries. She admitted she couldn't maintain such a discussion while walking and changed the subject, asking if he knew how many children the current king had. When Kunon admitted he had never thought about it, Rei revealed that the king was quite prolific, having fathered 7 princes and 10 princesses. She was the second princess, while Mirika was the 9th. She explained that the country was unique in that succession did not follow the standard rule of passing the throne to the eldest son. Instead, they followed a meritocracy where all princes and princesses were evaluated based on their skills, merits, and devotion to a particular art. This gave even the youngest child an equal opportunity to win the throne. Rei further revealed that she had already relinquished her right to the throne to focus on becoming a mage, aiming to be one of the best wizards in the country. While passing through a hallway, a sudden sensation drew Kunon toward a window, where he gazed aimlessly in the direction of a dark tower emanating various magical signatures. Rei then offered him a crucial piece of advice, fearing he might be dragged pointlessly into the fight for succession. She warned him not to affiliate with any factions until he was sure of his decision and to never speak words that could be used against him. Grateful for her valuable insights, Kunon decided to return the favor by showing her a special technique. He froze a thin layer of water beneath his shoes, creating ice skates. Rei loved the idea and asked to try it. Kunon cast the spell on her, and the two began skating wildly through the corridors. The guards chased them, panicked that Rei might get hurt, but the duo was much faster and managed to escape. However, their luck soon ran out when a knight spotted them. Although Rei jokingly suggested they could outrun him, the knight caught them and dragged them to the garden for a scolding. Later, they were escorted to the tower, where Kunon was introduced to Rondi, the head sorcerer of the kingdom. Kunon felt humbled by Rondi's presence, realizing how vast the world truly was. While Rei's magic was impressive, Rondi seemed to operate on a completely different level. Rondi immediately asked if Kunon was born with a water crest. When Kunon confirmed this but admitted he knew little about them, Rondi explained that there were 7 types of crests corresponding to magical affinities: fire, water, earth, wind, light, darkness, and void. Additionally, each crest had a rank from 1 to 5 stars. Kunon's 2-star rank was a fairly common occurrence, similar to Rei, who was a 2-star wind mage. Kunon compared himself and Rei to processed American cheese, while Rondi seemed like an artisanal wheel of aged parmesan. Rondi agreed that the description was apt and revealed he was actually a 4-star mage. Rondi then took them to the training ground to gauge Kunon's magical prowess. Kunon felt a bit intimidated, wondering if passing the test meant a royal mage would become his tutor. Rondi wasted no time and called forth an older student, also a royal mage, to demonstrate water magic. The student chanted a spell, creating a brilliant array of water droplets in the air. Rondi instructed Kunon to conquer the boy's magic with his own. Kunon recalled his teacher, Jen, telling him that he could not only create water but also manipulate water already present in the environment. Although he had never tried to control water created by another mage, he realized Rondi had devised a difficult assignment on the fly. Kunon decided to give it his all and attempted to wrestle control from the silver-haired mage. At first, he hit a roadblock as the droplets resisted, the other mage holding them effortlessly. Rondi watched with great interest. Refusing to lose, Kunon used all his stamina to force his will upon the magic. To everyone's surprise, Kunon managed to wrestle control of 2 water spheres before Rondi called a stop to the match. Kunon dropped to his knees, breathing hard, while the silver-haired mage honestly admitted he never thought a mere boy could steal his magic. The student offered to take Kunon under his tutelage, but other mages immediately chimed in, claiming they wanted Kunon as their pupil. Rondi silenced them all, wanting to see what else Kunon could do, and asked him to create something original. Kunon created a trampoline made of water magic. Rondi immediately began bouncing on it, having the time of his life, while other mages lined up to understand how it worked. Rondi told Kunon he wanted him to stay the night at the castle for further testing, but Kunon declined, explaining he had a dinner date with Mirika. Just then, Rei asked if he could create other animals or humans. Kunon confirmed he could do both and created a human doll made of water in the shape of his maid. He noted it was not yet perfect, it remained translucent, and he hadn't dialed in the movements. When the silver-haired mage asked if the dolls could perform tasks, Kunon recounted a failed attempt to make them fly. Forced to demonstrate, he sent the doll launching into the air repeatedly, scaring half the people in the castle and earning another scolding. At sunset, Rondi announced that Kunon had successfully passed the tests and that he would personally assign a sorcerer to help him improve his magic. Overjoyed, Kunon went to tell his father, only to find him irritated after hearing complaints about his son twice in a matter of hours. His father scolded him for being irresponsible before leaving for their mansion. Left alone with Rei, Kunon realized he needed to head to Mirika quickly, or he would be late for dinner. Rei suggested they use magic to travel. They decided to attempt a new experiment. Kunon created a water bubble, and Rei used her wind magic to propel them forward like a magic carpet. They soared through the skies, reaching Mirika's chambers in no time. Unfortunately, Rei forgot to decrease her magic gradually and turn it off completely, causing them to fall. They were caught by the knight Dario for the 3rd time that day, who was furious and subjected them to a long lecture. Meanwhile, Mirika waited in her dress for her Prince Charming, unaware of the chaos outside.